The paper flapped in the hot wind, pinned to the town posting board like something dead. Nate Brennan stood close enough to smell the ink, fresh and final. Tax lien notice. $800 due in 90 days. Brennan Ranch. Men gathered behind him, not close, just near enough to whisper and calculate. How much his cattle would fetch, whether his land was worth the trouble. Murphy, his brother-in-law, stood at the edge of the crowd, eyes fixed on his boots. Nate's calloused hand touched the paper once, testing if it was real. The sun beat down on his neck like a judge's gavel. From the saloon window across the street, Silas Drummond watched, smiling. Nate turned and walked through the crowd. No one spoke. No one met his eyes. He rode 3 miles in silence, the grinding of his broken windmill gear audible long before the ranch came into view. Then he heard it, a shovel scraping dirt. Someone was on his land. Nate pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the north field. The shovel sound came steady, rhythmic, metal biting earth, someone who knew how to dig. He dismounted slow, rifle already in his hand. 3 years of living alone had taught him to expect trouble before kindness. The woman stood in a shallow trench, back to him, working a ditch line straight as surveyors work. Apache, by the look of her, dark hair tied back, shoulders broad under a worn cotton shirt. She didn't run when his boot scraped stone, just stopped digging and turned. Her eyes met his without fear. Dust coated her face, turning her skin the same color as the land. "This is private property," Nate said. "I know." Her English was clear, accent slight. She planted the shovel and wiped her hands on her pants. "Saw your cattle. They're dying." "That's my concern." "Water table's 8 feet down right here." She pointed at the trench. "Your well's too shallow. Creek's gone alkali. But if you dig a ditch from this point," she gestured north, "you can reach clean water before winter." Nate's grip on the rifle loosened a fraction. "You a surveyor?" She reached into a canvas bag at her feet and pulled out tools. A homemade compass, a plumb line, a bent nail filed to a point. "My husband was. Taught me." "Where's he now?" "Dead. Fort Apache 2 years back." The wind kicked up dust between them. Nate's windmill groaned in the distance, that broken gear grinding metal on metal. He glanced at the trench. Perfectly angled, professional work. "Why here?" he asked. "Saw your posting in town. Man with 90 days and a tax bill doesn't have money for hired help." She met his eyes again. "But he might have food, and a roof that doesn't leak." Nate studied her. Tall, strong, hands calloused from real work. No desperation in her voice, just plain accounting. He thought of the empty cabin, the meals he ate standing at the stove, because sitting at the table alone felt worse. "1 week," he said. "You work, I feed you. After that, we see." She nodded once. "Fair." "What's your name?" "Ahanai. White people call me Anna." "Nate Brennan." She picked up the shovel. "Your cattle have maybe 3 weeks before the weak ones start dropping. We need to move fast." Nate lowered the rifle. "Got another shovel in the barn." They worked until sunset, Nate following her directions. She knew things he didn't, how to read soil color for moisture, how to angle a ditch to prevent collapse. By the time the light failed, they'd dug 40 feet. Inside the cabin, Nate lit the lamp while Anai washed her hands in the basin. The water turned brown. He pulled out cornbread and dried beef, set it on the table without ceremony. She ate slow, methodical. He watched her hands. They shook slightly, though her face stayed calm. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. "Yesterday." He pushed the rest of the cornbread toward her. She took it without argument. "You know people in town won't like this," Nate said. "Apache woman on a white man's ranch, they'll talk." "They already talk about you," Ahinai said. Saw the way they looked. Man with a tax lien is already finished in their eyes. Nate's jaw tightened. She wasn't wrong. "And when the men come asking questions?" he said. Anai set down the cornbread. Her eyes held his across the table. "You mean when Silas Drummond comes asking?" The name hung in the air like smoke. Nate leaned back. "You know him?" "Saw him watching you at the posting board. Man like that doesn't watch for no reason." She paused. "He'll come. Question is what you'll say when he does." Nate stared at the lamp flame. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the walls thinner. Outside, his windmill ground its broken song into the dark. "I'll say I hired help for the drought," he said finally. "What I do with my own land is my own business." Ahinai nodded slowly. "Until it isn't." She stood, rinsed her plate in the basin, the smell of lye soap mixed with dust and sweat. "Barn or cabin floor?" she asked. Barnes got a cot. Take it. She moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Brennan, that windmill gear, I can fix it. But the real problem is what happens when the water flows and your cattle recover. What problem? Men who want you to fail don't like being proven wrong. The door closed behind her. Nate sat alone at the table, listening to her footsteps cross the yard. The lamp flickered. The windmill groaned. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of hoofbeats. Just one rider, moving slow along the fence line, watching. Morning came with the smell of coffee. Nate woke to find Hanai already outside, the fire pit smoking, a pot balanced on stones. She'd ground beans he didn't remember having. Found them in the back of your cupboard, she said when he stepped onto the porch. Figured they'd gone to waste otherwise. He took the cup she offered. The coffee was strong, bitter, exactly how he liked it. They drank in silence, watching the sun burn off the last of the night's coolness. Town today, Nate said. Need to pick up fence wire. Ahnai's hand tightened slightly on her cup. I'll keep working the ditch. Probably better. He didn't need to explain why. The ride into town took 40 minutes. Nate felt eyes on him the moment he hitched his horse at the general store. Conversations stopped, heads turned just enough to mark his presence. He was reaching for the store door when a hand clapped his shoulder. Nate Brennan. Silas Drummond's voice carried across the street like he wanted everyone to hear. Heard you got some help out at your place. Nate turned. Drummond stood close, too close, wearing a suit despite the heat. His cologne smelled of bay rum and ambition. Hired a hand, Nate said. Drought's hitting everyone. Apache hand, though. Drummond smiled, all teeth. That's interesting. Didn't know labor had a color requirement. Doesn't, but it has consequences. Drummond lowered his voice just slightly, creating the illusion of privacy while everyone strained to listen. Folks around here, they've got long memories. Geronimo's surrender was just last year. Some people, they don't distinguish between one Indian and another. Some people need to mind their business. Business is what I wanted to talk about. Drummond gestured down the street. Walk with me a moment? It wasn't a request. Nate followed him away from the store, aware of Murphy watching from the bank window across the street. They stopped in the shade of the livery stable. The smell of horse manure and hay was thick. Drummond pulled a cigar from his pocket, didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers. That tax lien, Drummond said. $800, that's steep for a ranch your size. I'll manage. Will you? Drummond's smile sharpened. Because here's the thing, Nate. The bank sold your debt. Nate's stomach dropped, but he kept his face still. To who? Me. Drummond bit the end off his cigar, spat it into the dirt. Paid $600 cash. Seemed like a good investment. This valley's going to be worth something once the railroad comes through. The words landed like fists. Nate's hands curled at his sides. So when that 90 days is up, Drummond continued, you don't pay the bank anymore. You pay me. And if you don't, he spread his hands. Well, foreclosure's foreclosure. Nothing personal. Why? Nate's voice came out rough. You've got more land than you can work already. It's not about the land, Nate. It's about the water. Drummond finally lit his cigar, puffed smoke into the hot air. Railroad's coming through in 2 years. Stations need water. Lots of it. Man who controls the water sources in this valley controls everything. My ranch doesn't have enough water to matter. Not yet, but you start digging irrigation, tapping that northern aquifer. Drummond's eyes narrowed. That changes things. So here's some friendly advice. Don't dig. Don't improve. Just let nature take its course. 90 days, you walk away clean. I'll even pay you for the cattle. And if I say no? Drummond's smile vanished. Then you'll find out how many friends you don't have in this town, starting with that Apache woman. People find out you're harboring her. That's a whole different conversation. He walked away before Nate could respond, boots loud on the boardwalk. Nate stood there, tasting dust and rage. The morning sun felt heavier now, pressing down like a hand. Nate. Murphy appeared from behind the livery, glancing over his shoulder. His face was pale, sweat beading despite the shade. Not now, Murphy. Yes, now. Murphy grabbed his arm. You don't understand. Drummond? He's been planning this for months. Bought up 4 other ranches the same way. Waits till they're desperate, buys the debt, forecloses. He's already got contracts with the railroad. You could have warned me. I tried. Sent you a letter 3 weeks ago. Never got it. Murphy's face twisted. Jesus. He probably intercepted it. He's got the postmaster in his pocket. Nate pulled free. Why are you telling me this now? Because Sarah made me promise. Murphy's voice dropped. Your wife was her sister. She'd kill me if I let him take your ranch without a fight. What kind of fight? He owns the debt. Law's on his side. Murphy glanced around again, leaned in close. The smell of ink and paper clung to his clothes. Father Mackey. Talk to him. He keeps his own land registry at the church. If Drummond's doing what I think he's doing, filing false surveys, moving boundary markers, Mackey might have proof. Might? It's more than you've got now. A wagon rolled past, the driver staring. Murphy stepped back, his face smoothing into a neutral mask. I have to get back. Just be careful, Nate. Drummond doesn't lose, not ever. He walked away quickly, shoulders hunched. Nate stood alone in the livery shade. His broken windmill gear felt like a metaphor now, something grinding itself to pieces while everyone watched. He rode home fast, the sun beating on his neck. The ranch appeared in the distance, and with it, a new sound. Water. Moving water. A Kenai had reached the aquifer, the ditch was flowing, and on the ridge above his property, a single rider sat motionless on horseback. Even from a distance, Nate recognized Drummond's gray gelding, watching, always watching. The water ran clear and cold. Nate dismounted and knelt at the ditch's edge, let it flow over his hands. The shock of it after months of dust and heat felt like a miracle. Anai stood 20 feet away, shovel resting on her shoulder. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes tracked the ridge where Drummond had been. The rider was gone now, leaving only dust settling in the air. He saw, she said. Yeah. That's bad. Yeah. Nate stood, shook water from his hands. But the cattle need this. We keep working. They spent the afternoon extending the ditch toward the main pasture. By sunset, the first cows had found the water. They crowded in, jostling, drinking deep. One of the calves bawled with something that sounded like relief. Nate felt his chest loosen for the first time in weeks. This might work. They might actually survive. Tomorrow, I'll shore up the banks, Ahinai said, wiping her face with her sleeve. Keep it from collapsing when the herd gets aggressive. Good. Nate hesitated. I need to go into town again, early, talk to someone. The priest? He looked at her sharply. How'd you know? Your brother-in-law has that look. Man with information he's not supposed to share. She leaned on the shovel. What's Father Mackey got that Drummond doesn't? Maybe nothing. Maybe something that matters. They walked back to the cabin as the light failed. The windmill's grinding had become almost comfortable, a rhythm marking time. Onai stopped at the barn door. Mr. Brennan, when the water works and your cattle recover, Drummond won't just watch anymore. I know. Do you? Her voice sharpened. Because I've seen men like him before. They don't fight fair, they fight legal, and the law always sides with property over people. Not always. Always when one of those people is Apache. She disappeared into the barn before he could respond. Nate stood in the yard, listening to the water flow and the windmill grind, and somewhere far off, a coyote testing the night. Dawn came cold. Nate rode into town with the sun still low, casting long shadows across the empty street. St. Xavier's Church sat at the far end, white paint peeling, bell tower leaning slightly like it was tired. Father Mackey was sweeping the steps when Nate arrived. The old priest looked up, squinting against the light. Nate Brennan, been a while since I've seen you at services. Been busy staying alive. Nate dismounted, tied his horse. Need to talk, private. Mackey set the broom aside, gestured toward the church door. God's house is always private. Inside, the smell of beeswax candles and old wood wrapped around them. Morning light filtered through stained glass, painting the floor in reds and blues. Mackey led him past the altar to a small office behind the sacristy. The room was cramped, lined with ledgers and books. A massive leather-bound registry sat open on the desk, pages covered in neat handwriting. Murphy sent you, Mackey said, not asking. He mentioned you keep records. I do. Mackey ran his finger down a page. The land office makes mistakes, sometimes on purpose. Someone needs to remember where the boundaries actually are. He pulled a rolled map from beneath the desk, spread it flat. The paper crackled, smelling of dust and ink. Lines crisscrossed the territory, parcels marked in different colors. This is the valley. Mackey's finger traced the creek, then moved north. Your ranch is here. Drummond's holdings, he circled a large area in red, are here, here, and here. Nate leaned closer. The red circles surrounded his property on 3 sides, like a noose. Now look at this. Mackey pulled out another map, this one official land office issue. He laid it beside his own. The boundaries didn't match. See? Mackey pointed to discrepancies. Drummond's parcels are larger on the official map, sometimes by 50 yards, sometimes by a quarter mile. Each time the neighboring ranches get smaller. How? False surveys. He brings his own surveyor, files amended claims, says there was an error in the original measurement. Land office stamps it without checking. Most ranchers never even know they lost land until it's too late. Nate's jaw clenched. How many? 6 ranches in 2 years? All foreclosed after their boundaries mysteriously shrank? Mackey closed the registry. I've kept notes, documented every discrepancy, but I'm just a priest. I can testify to what I've seen, but I can't force the land office to investigate. Why are you helping me? Mackey's eyes softened. Because this is theft dressed as law. And because you remind me of my sister. She had your late wife's stubbornness, died young, like her, cancer. The silence between them felt heavy with old grief. What do I need? Nate asked finally. Proof your boundaries are being tampered with. If Drummond plants false survey stakes on your property, measure them against my maps. If they don't match, we have evidence. And the Apache woman? Mackey's eyebrows rose. That'll complicate things, unless... He paused. Unless she has her own land claim. Widows can file for allotment parcels. If she proves her husband's death, she's entitled to 160 acres. She'd need documents. Military discharge papers if he served. Death certificate. Something official. Mackey rolled up the maps carefully. With her own land, she's not your employee. She's your neighbor. Harder for Drummond to claim you're breaking some unwritten rule. Nate straightened, hope flickering. You'd testify, if it came to that? I'd testify before God and the whole territory. Mackey smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Though I should warn you, men like Drummond don't go quietly. He'll come at you hard once he realizes you're fighting back. Let him come. Nate rode home fast, the morning sun climbing. The ridge was empty now, no watchers. But when he crested the final hill, he saw them. His cattle, 20 head strong, clustered around the new ditch, drinking deep, alive. And at the water's edge, Anai crouched with a knife, carving something into a wooden post she'd planted. When she stood, he could see what she'd made. A simple gate frame, marking where the ditch entered his property. Her initials were carved there, small, permanent. She looked up as he approached, her expression carefully neutral, but her hand rested on the carved wood like a claim. It'll keep the cattle from trampling the banks, she said. Nate nodded slowly. The water flowed through her gate, catching sunlight. On the eastern ridge, a dust cloud rose. Riders, multiple horses, coming fast. 3 riders came down the slope at a trot, Drummond in front, flanked by 2 men Nate didn't recognize. One carried surveying equipment, a tripod and measuring chain. The other wore a county badge that caught the sunlight. Nate moved to stand beside Akanai. She held the knife loose at her side, not threatening, just ready. The horses stopped 10 feet from the ditch. Drummond dismounted with the careful precision of a man who'd rehearsed his entrance. The surveyor followed, already setting up his tripod. The deputy stayed mounted, hand resting near his holstered pistol. Morning, Nate. Drummond's voice was pleasant, conversational. See, you've been busy. Making improvements. It's my land. That's actually what we're here to discuss. Drummond gestured to the surveyor. Mr. Patterson here is county surveyor. We've had some concerns about water rights in this area. Patterson was thin, nervous, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that wouldn't hold steady. He fumbled with his measuring chain, dropping it once before getting the tripod positioned. What concerns? Nate asked. This ditch. Drummond walked closer, stopping at the wooden gate Ahinai had carved. He ran his finger over her initials, then looked at her directly for the first time. Unauthorized irrigation from a secondary aquifer, that requires a permit. Since when? Since the Territory Water Management Act of 1885. Drummond pulled a folded document from his coat. The paper crackled as he opened it. Section 4, subsection 2, any irrigation work drawing from underground sources requires county approval and surveyor certification. Without it, the work is illegal. Anai's knuckles went white around the knife handle. Nate stepped forward slightly, putting himself between her and Drummond. I wasn't told that when I filed my homestead claim. Requirements change. Territory's growing, can't have everyone just digging wherever they please. Drummond's smile was razor thin. Of course, the penalty for unauthorized irrigation is, well, let me see. He made a show of reading the document. $200 fine, or seizure of equipment used in the violation. The word equipment hung in the air. Patterson finished his measurements, scribbling numbers in a leather notebook. The deputy shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. Equipment meaning the shovels, Nate said carefully. Equipment meaning any labor used in the construction. Drummond's eyes slid to Anai. If she dug this ditch, she's part of the violation. County can seize her labor as compensation. The words landed like a blow. Akenai went very still beside him. That's slavery, Nate said. That's territorial law. Indentured servitude to pay civil fines. It's all legal. Drummond folded the paper, tucked it away. Of course, there's an alternative. She could work my land instead. 6 months contracted labor, that would satisfy the debt, and then some. She's not property. No, but her labor is, according to this statute. Drummond turned to Patterson. Mr. Patterson, what's your official measurement? Patterson cleared his throat. His voice came out weak. The ditch measures approximately 120 feet, depth of 4 feet, drawing from an underground source. No permit on file with the county. There we have it. Drummond spread his hands. Illegal irrigation. The fine stands, or she works off the debt. Nate's hand moved toward the rifle still strapped to his saddle. The deputy's hand tightened on his pistol grip. Don't, Drummond said softly. That would be assaulting a county official. They'd hang you before sunset. The wind kicked up, carrying the smell of water and dust. The cattle lowed in the distance, unaware of how close salvation was to disaster. Nate's mind raced, searching for an angle, a way out. What if she has her own land? The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. Drummond's smile faltered slightly. What? What if she files for an allotment parcel? Widows are entitled to claims. If she's working her own land, not mine, there's no employment, no seizure. She'd need proof of widow status. Drummond's voice sharpened. Death certificate, military records. That takes months to process, and you've got 30 days before foreclosure. He stepped closer. Or did you forget that part? Because here's how this works, Nate. You let her go work my land. I'll extend your debt deadline. Give you time to find the money. Otherwise, 30 days, I take the ranch, and you lose everything anyway. The trap was perfect, elegant. No matter which way Nate moved, Drummond won. How much time? Nate asked, hating himself for even considering it. 6 months. Same as her contract. You get 6 months to come up with $800. Drummond pulled out a pre-written contract. All legal, signed and witnessed. Nate looked at Achnai. Her face was stone, but her eyes held something desperate. Not fear, calculation, like she was measuring distances she couldn't escape. No, she said quietly. Everyone turned to her. No, she repeated louder. I won't work for him. Drummond's pleasant mask cracked. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Achnai met his eyes. I can leave. Walk into the desert right now. You can't seize labor that isn't here. Then Nate loses his ranch in 30 days. That's his risk to take. The deputy dismounted now, hand on his pistol. Ma'am, resisting a county order? What if I have the documents? Achnai's voice cut through. What if I can prove my husband's death? Drummond laughed. Then produce them, right now. Otherwise this conversation is over and you're coming with me. Achnai looked at Nate for a long moment. Something passed between them, a question, a permission, a leap of faith. Then she turned and walked toward the barn. Drummond's confidence wavered. Where is she going? To get your proof, Nate said. They waited in tense silence. The surveyor packed his equipment nervously. The deputy kept his hand near his weapon. Drummond's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Achnai emerged from the barn carrying a worn leather satchel. She walked slowly, deliberately, back to the group. From the satchel she pulled a Bible, pages yellowed and brittle, and tucked inside, folded small, were papers. She unfolded them with careful hands. Military discharge papers, the ink faded but legible. Corporal James Whitehorse, she read. Apache Scout, 4th Cavalry. Honorably discharged May 1885, died of fever, Fort Apache, June 1885. She held the papers out to Drummond. Death recorded by military physician, signed and sealed. Drummond snatched the papers, scanned them, his face darkened as he read. Height 5 feet 9 inches. I continued. Scar on left hand from childhood accident. Buried in post cemetery, plot 47. These could be forged, Drummond said, but his voice lacked conviction. They're filed with the War Department, Ashnai said. You want to call Washington and check? Patterson leaned over, squinting at the papers. Those seals look authentic. Official stamps. Drummond's hand crumpled the edges of the documents. His pleasant facade was gone now, replaced by something cold and sharp. Fine. You're a widow. Congratulations. He shoved the papers back at her. But filing an allotment claim takes time. Forms, surveys, approval from the Indian Affairs Office. You don't have land yet, which means you're still working his property illegally. So, I'll file today, Anai said. Won't matter. Processing takes 60 days minimum. Nate's deadline is 30. Drummond turned to him. So here's your choice. Let her work my land for 6 months, I extend your deadline. Or refuse, lose your ranch in 30 days, and she gets nothing anyway because she'll be filing a claim on land you no longer own. The logic was airtight, cruel, perfect. Nate felt the weight of it pressing down. The cattle behind him, drinking from water they'd fought to reach. The cabin where his wife had died dreaming of this place. 30 days between survival and surrender. There's a third option, a new voice said. Father Mackey rode up the path, his old mare plodding slow. He dismounted with a grunt, holding a leather satchel of his own. And what's that, priest? Drummond's voice dripped contempt. The truth. Mackey opened his satchel and pulled out maps. About where your property lines actually are, Mr. Drummond, and how they've been moving. Drummond's face went white, then red. This isn't your business, Father. Wrong. Mackey spread the maps on the ground. It became my business when you started falsifying surveys in God's name. 6 ranches. I've documented every lie. The deputy leaned forward in his saddle, suddenly interested. Patterson looked like he wanted to disappear. Drummond's hand shook as he pointed at Mackey. You're interfering with county business. I'm preserving the truth. There's a difference. Mackey looked at Nate. Your northern boundary, according to my records, extends another 50 yards past where Mr. Drummond's survey claims, which means that aquifer, it's entirely on your land. No shared water rights, no county jurisdiction. Those are church records, Drummond snarled. They're not legal. They're notarized witness testimony. I'll swear to them in any court. Mackey smiled gently. Along with testimony about 5 other ranchers whose land mysteriously shrank right before you foreclosed. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Drummond's facade shattered completely. You have no idea what you're interfering with. The railroad? The railroad doesn't care about your fraudulent surveys, Mackey said, but I imagine they'd care about a partner who's facing criminal charges for land theft. Drummond turned to Patterson. The surveyor wouldn't meet his eyes. The deputy was studying the maps now, frowning. This true, Patterson? The deputy asked. These surveys been fixed? Patterson's silence was answer enough. Drummond grabbed his horse's reins. His hands shook with fury. This isn't over, not even close. He mounted in one violent motion. 30 days, Brennan. You still owe $800. And when you can't pay, I'll take everything. Maps won't save you then. He spurred his horse hard. Patterson scrambled to pack his equipment and follow. The deputy remained a moment longer, studying the maps, then tipped his hat to Mackey and rode after them. The dust settled slowly. The water kept flowing. Nate's legs felt weak. He sat down hard on the ground, head in his hands. Anai knelt beside the maps, tracing the boundaries with her finger. 50 yards, she said softly. That's the difference between legal and illegal. That's the difference between survival and slavery, Mackey corrected. He rolled up the maps. But he's right about one thing. 30 days isn't long to find $800. Can't be done, Nate said. Not without selling the cattle. And without cattle, the ranch is worthless anyway. Mackey looked at Anai. What about your allotment filing? If you've got proof of widow status, you can file tomorrow. And get the land in 60 days, Anai said, after his deadline. Unless, Mackey said slowly, we file a joint partnership. Your allotment adjoins his ranch. You agree to share water resources. That creates a legal entity that supersedes his individual debt. Can you do that? Nate asked. I've never seen it done, but I've never seen a lot of things that turned out to be possible. Mackey handed the maps to Nate. Question is, are you willing to bet everything on a technicality? Nate looked at Akanai. She looked back, steady and sure. "How do we file?" she asked. The fire crackled low, sparks drifting into the dark. Nate and Akanai sat on opposite sides, the smell of coffee and sage thick between them. Father Mackey had left an hour ago with promises to prepare the partnership documents. "He'll come at us harder now," Nate said. "I know." Anai poked the fire with a stick. "Men like Drummond don't forgive being embarrassed." Murphy said he's over-leveraged. Railroad backers are pressuring him. Then he's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. She looked up, flames reflecting in her eyes. But they also stop caring about rules. Nate sipped his coffee. It had gone bitter and cold. "Why'd you really come here? Town's got other ranches, other men who need help." Anaya was quiet for a long moment. The windmill ground its broken rhythm in the darkness. "Saw your face at that posting board," she said finally. "Saw how the men looked at you, like you were already gone, already buried." She paused. "Knew that look. Wore it myself when they told me I had no legal standing. No husband, no claim, no future. So you picked the losing side?" "Picked the side that was still fighting." She smiled faintly. "Even if you didn't know it yet." Nate studied her across the flames. Strong jaw, hands scarred from work, eyes that had seen too much too young. His wife had looked nothing like her. Emma had been small, pale, city-raised, but something in Anni's stubbornness reminded him of Emma's refusal to give up on this land even when it was killing her. "If this partnership works," he said, "we split everything, water rights, profits, decisions." "You sure about that? White man giving legal power to an Apache woman? Town'll have opinions." "Town already has opinions. Might as well earn them." Anai nodded slowly. "Fair." They sat in silence, listening to the night. Coyotes yipped in the distance. The cattle moved softly near the water, and somewhere out past the fence line, horses, just the faint sound of hooves on hardpan. Achnai's hand moved to the knife at her belt. "How many?" Nate asked, not moving. "2, maybe 3, staying just outside rifle range." Drummond's men. Watching, waiting for us to make a mistake. She stood slowly, stretching like she was just tired. "I'll take first watch. We'll split it. 3-hour shifts." She didn't argue. Nate went inside and lay on the bed fully clothed, rifle beside him. He didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion took him fast and hard. He woke to Anai's hand on his shoulder. The moon had moved halfway across the sky. "Your turn," she said. "Nothing yet, but they're still out there." They traded places. Nate took up position on the porch, Winchester across his lap. The night was cool now, the heat finally broken. He could smell rain somewhere far off, promising and distant. Around 3 in the morning, Murphy appeared on the road. His horse walked slow, quiet. He dismounted at the fence and approached on foot. "Bit late for a social call," Nate said from the shadows. Murphy jerked, then exhaled hard. "Jesus, Nate, announce yourself." "You're on my property, uninvited." "I'm here to warn you." Murphy came closer, keeping his voice low. "Drummond's meeting with his railroad contacts tomorrow. They're not happy about what happened today. Father Mackey showing up with those maps, that's a problem for them." "Good." "No, not good. They're talking about ways to discredit Mackey. Claim he's senile. Forged documents showing his records are wrong." Murphy's face was haggard in the moonlight. "And they're looking into the Apache woman, her documents, whether they can challenge the military records." "On what grounds?" "Any grounds they can invent. Drummond's got money and connections. He can tie this up in courts for years." "We file the partnership tomorrow. That buys time." "Does it?" Murphy stepped closer. "Sarah's worried sick. Says I'm putting my job at risk helping you. And she's right. Drummond finds out I'm leaking information. I'm finished." Then stop. "Can't. Already in too deep." Murphy pulled an envelope from his coat. "This came through the bank today. Thought you should see it." Nate took the envelope. Inside was a letter from the Territorial Land Office. Official seal, heavy paper. He couldn't read it in the dark, but Murphy's expression told him enough. "What's it say?" "Drummond filed a complaint. Claims your northern boundary is under dispute. They're sending an official surveyor next week to remeasure everything." Murphy's voice was tight. "If that surveyor sides with Drummond, your aquifer becomes shared water, which means you need county permits, which means—" "He wins anyway." Nate crumpled the letter. "Son of a bitch." "There's more." He's claiming the Apache woman is unlawfully occupying territorial land, that her husband's death certificate is questionable. He's demanding she appear before a federal Indian agent to verify her status. When? 20 days. Same building as the land survey hearing. Nate's grip tightened on the rifle. 20 days. Everything converging at once. He looked toward the barn, where Anai slept. She'd been so certain the discharge papers would protect her. If she can't prove her status, Murphy said, they'll declare her ward of the territory. That means she gets assigned to a reservation or an approved employer. Either way, Drummond controls where she goes. He planned this. All of it. Of course he did. He's been planning since the day he bought your debt. Murphy backed toward his horse. I shouldn't have come. If anyone saw me... Murphy. His brother-in-law stopped. Thank you, Nate said. Murphy nodded once, mounted, and rode into the darkness without another word. Nate sat on the porch steps until dawn, the letter heavy in his pocket. When Ahnai emerged from the barn, she took one look at his face and knew. What happened? He handed her the letter. She read it by the growing light, her jaw tightening with each line. They're going to try to take everything, she said. The land, my status, all of it. Not if we fight. How? They control the courts, the surveyors, the Indian agents. Her voice stayed level, but her hands shook. This isn't a fight. It's an execution. The sun broke over the ridge, painting everything gold. The water in the ditch caught the light, flowing steady. The cattle gathered to drink, calves nursing, life continuing. Nate stood. His back ached, his eyes burned, but something in him had hardened overnight into something sharp and immovable. Then we make them work for it, he said. Every inch, every day, we document everything, get witnesses, make so much noise they can't hide what they're doing. Anai looked at the letter again, then at the flowing water. 20 days. 20 days. She folded the letter carefully and handed it back. Then we'd better get started. Behind them, the windmill's broken gear ground its relentless song. On the eastern ridge, the watchers returned. The town had a different feel when Nate and Anai rode in together. Eyes tracked them from windows. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The general store clerk suddenly became very interested in rearranging canned goods when they approached. Nate tied both horses at the church hitching post. The smell of dust and horse sweat hung heavy in the morning air. You sure about this? Anai asked quietly. Too late to turn back now. Father Mackey met them at the door, face grim. Come inside, quickly. They followed him to the small office. Maps and documents covered every surface. Mackey moved aside a stack of ledgers to reveal fresh ink stains on the desk. I've drafted the partnership papers, he said. But there's a complication. There's always a complication, Nate said. Mackey spread out a new document. Drummond filed a boundary protest this morning. Claimed my church records aren't valid because I'm not a licensed surveyor. He's demanding an official county measurement. We knew he'd do that. Yes, but look at who's been assigned. Mackey tapped a name on the document. Martin Gehrig. He's done 6 surveys for Drummond in the past year, every single one found in Drummond's favor. Ahnai leaned over the desk. Can we request a different surveyor? Filed the request an hour ago, but it takes 2 weeks to process and the hearing is in 20 days. Mackey sat heavily in his chair. They've boxed us in perfectly. The church bell tolled 9 times outside. Through the window, Nate saw a crowd gathering in the town square. More people than usual for a weekday morning. What's that about? He asked. Mackey's expression darkened. Public meeting, Drummond called it. Claims he needs to address concerns about territorial security and illegal land use. He's turning the town against us. He's been working on it all week. Mackey pulled out a newspaper clipping. The headline read, Apache squatter threatens water supply. This ran in yesterday's territorial paper. Doesn't mention your ranch by name, but everyone knows. Anai took the clipping. Her jaw worked as she read. They're saying I'm stealing water that belongs to white settlers. The editor owes Drummond money. He prints what he's told. Mackey looked between them. You need to be at that meeting. If you don't defend yourselves, Drummond controls the narrative. And if we show up, he makes a spectacle of us in front of the whole town, Nate said. Either way, he wins, Anai said bitterly. Unless... She stopped, thinking. Unless what? Nate asked. Unless we give them something they can't ignore. She turned to Mackey. Those church records, The other ranches where Drummond moved boundaries, do you have names? 6 of them, all foreclosed in the past 2 years. Where are they now, those ranchers? Mackey's eyes widened. 3 moved east, 1 died, but 2 are still in the territory. Henderson runs a freight business in Laramie. Collins works at the rail yard in Cheyenne. Can you send telegrams? What are you thinking? Nate asked. A&I's face was set. If Drummond wants a public meeting, let's give him one. But with witnesses who can testify to his pattern. Men who've already lost to him. White men, so the town has to listen. Mackey stood slowly. That's actually brilliant, if they're willing to testify. They've got nothing left to lose, Ajnai said, and maybe something to gain, if this works. I'll send the telegrams now. Mackey gathered papers. But the meeting starts in an hour. Even if they agree, they can't get here in time. Then we stall, Nate said. Make him work for it. They walked to the town square together. The crowd had swollen to maybe 60 people. Drummond stood on the raised platform near the posting board, looking every inch the concerned citizen in his pressed suit. When he saw Nate and Anai approaching, his smile sharpened. Ah, here's the man of the hour, Drummond called out, and his associate. The way he said associate drew murmurs from the crowd. Nate felt Ahinai tense beside him. Folks, Drummond continued, I've called this meeting because we face a threat to our water security. As you know, there's been unauthorized drilling on the northern aquifer, irrigation work done without permits, without oversight, potentially contaminating water sources we all depend on. That's a lie, Nate said, loud enough to carry. The aquifer is entirely on my property. According to whose survey? Drummond pulled out papers. I have documentation here showing the aquifer extends onto territorial land, which means it's a shared resource, which means permits are required. Show us the survey, someone in the crowd called out. Drummond hesitated, just a fraction. The official survey is scheduled for next week, but preliminary measurements clearly indicate preliminary measurements done by your man Patterson, Nate interrupted, who's been filing false surveys for you for 2 years. The crowd stirred. Drummond's face darkened. That's a serious accusation, he said carefully. It's a documented fact. Father Mackey pushed through the crowd, carrying his leather satchel. I have church records showing systematic boundary fraud across 6 properties, all coincidentally foreclosed after their land mysteriously shrank. Church records aren't legal evidence, Drummond snapped. There's sworn testimony from a priest, someone called out. Mrs. Chen, the laundry owner. That counts for something? Other voices joined in, not many but enough. Drummond's control of the crowd was slipping. Furthermore, Mackey continued, spreading maps on a nearby barrel, these records show Mr. Brennan's northern boundary extends 50 yards past where Mr. Drummond's survey claims the aquifer is entirely on private property. And who verified these measurements? Drummond demanded. You're not a surveyor, Father. You're a priest who keeps books. That's not the same thing. The original homestead survey was done by Thomas Wright in 1879, Mackey said. His notes are filed with my records. Mr. Wright died last year, but his measurements were verified by 3 witnesses at the time. Their signatures are here. He pointed to a page. Drummond moved closer to look, his confidence cracking. Those signatures are 8 years old, Drummond said. Land shifts, boundaries change. That's why we need updated surveys. Boundaries don't change by 50 yards, Nate said. Not unless someone moves the markers. The crowd was listening now, really listening. Drummond's jaw clenched. I've brought this to the land office for official review, he said, voice tight. They'll send their own surveyor, not Patterson, an independent observer. We'll settle this properly. When? Anai asked, her first words to the crowd. Heads turned. 3 weeks, Drummond said. Your foreclosure deadline is in 20 days, she said. Convenient timing. Drummond's mask slipped completely. You don't even have standing to speak here. You're a squatter on territorial land. I'm a widow with legal documentation, Ajnai said, voice steady despite the hostile stares. I have every right to file for an allotment parcel, and when I do, my land will adjoin Mr. Brennan's ranch, making us legal partners with shared water rights. If you can prove your status, Drummond said, which requires appearing before a federal Indian agent, which you haven't done. I will, in 20 days, same day as your survey hearing. The crowd murmured. This was getting complicated. Too many claims, counterclaims, legal tangles. Exactly what Drummond didn't want. "This is all very interesting," Drummond said, recovering his composure, "but it doesn't change the fundamental issue. Unauthorized irrigation threatens our water supply. Until proper permits are filed and approved, that ditch should be shut down." "You want my cattle to die?" Nate said flatly. "I want the law followed. The law you bought and paid for." Drummond's hand shook, just slightly, but Nate saw it, saw the rage barely contained beneath the suit and smile. "We're done here," Drummond said. "The hearing is in 20 days. We'll let the territorial officials decide." He stepped down from the platform. "And Mr. Brennan, I'd be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. Slander is also illegal." He walked away, but his men stayed, 3 of them loitering at the edge of the crowd, watching. The crowd dispersed slowly. Some people nodded to Nate. Most avoided his eyes. Mrs. Chin paused briefly. "My husband's cousin lost his ranch to Drummond 2 years ago," she said quietly. "Same way. Survey changed. Foreclosure followed. We believe you." She moved on before Nate could respond. Father Mackey rolled up his maps. "That bought us time, but Henderson and Collins need to testify. Without them, it's your word against Drummond's documentation." "Will they come?" Anai asked. "I don't know, but I sent the telegrams. We'll know by tomorrow." They walked back to their horses. The watchers followed at a distance, not hiding anymore. Just presence, just pressure. Nate untied his horse, his hands steady despite the adrenaline crash. 20 days. 20 days, Anai echoed. They rode home in silence. The ridge was empty now, but tracks showed where multiple horses had waited, watching the cabin, watching them leave. Inside, everything was as they'd left it. But the feeling had changed. The cabin felt exposed now, vulnerable. That night, Nate checked the rifle 3 times. Ahanai slept in the cabin instead of the barn, her knife within reach. Neither spoke about the shift, but both understood. The war had started. 5 days passed. No word from Henderson or Collins. The telegraph office claimed the messages had been delivered, but Father Mackey's face grew more worried each time Nate rode into town. The ditch kept flowing. The cattle recovered. Life continued with the strange normality of waiting for disaster. On the 6th morning, Nate woke to find Ahanai sitting at the table, staring at her discharge papers. The Bible lay open beside her, pages worn soft from handling. "Second thoughts?" he asked, pouring coffee. "Third and fourth." She didn't look up. "Been thinking about what happens if we lose." "We don't lose." "But if we do?" Her finger traced the edge of a page. "You lose a ranch. I lose everything. They'll put me on a reservation, or worse, assign me to some approved employer. Could be Drummond, could be someone worse." Nate sat across from her. The morning light made her look younger, more uncertain than he'd seen her. "We could leave," he said. "Both of us. Ride out tonight. Mexico, maybe. Or California." She finally looked at him. "You'd give up your land? Your wife's grave?" "I'd give up a lot to not watch them destroy you." The words hung between them. Anai's eyes softened, then hardened again. "No," she said. "Running just proves we had no right to be here in the first place." She closed the Bible carefully. "Besides, that gate I carved? My initials are on it. First time I've marked anything permanent since my husband died. I'm not leaving that behind." A knock at the door made them both jump. Nate grabbed the rifle before answering. Father Mackey stood on the porch, but he wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, one gray-haired and weathered, the other younger with a scarred face and missing 2 fingers on his left hand. "Henderson and Collins," Mackey said. They came. They gathered around the table, 5 people, in a cabin, built for 2. Henderson accepted coffee, but Collins declined, his jaw tight with old anger. "Took us 3 days to get here," Henderson said. His voice had the rasp of a lifetime smoker. "Nearly didn't come. Wife said it was stirring up old pain for nothing." "Why did you?" Nate asked. "Because Collins here convinced me." Henderson gestured to the younger man. "Told me about his boy, how he cried when they had to leave their ranch. 5 years old, didn't understand why his home got taken." Collins spoke for the first time. "I understand now. It was never about unpaid debts or bad luck. It was a system. Drummond had it down to a science." His scarred hands clenched. "Took me 2 years to admit that. Another year to stop drinking about it." "Tell them what happened," Mackey said gently. Henderson went first. His story matched what Mackey had documented, a boundary survey that mysteriously shrank his property, cutting off access to his best grazing land. When he protested, the land office produced documents he'd never seen before, survey amendments, signed affidavits from witnesses he'd never met. 6 months later, foreclosure. Collins's story was worse. His ranch had a spring, good water, year-round flow. Drummond's survey moved the spring onto territorial land, claimed Collins had been illegally using public water. The fine was $300. Collins couldn't pay. The ranch went to auction. Drummond bought it for half its value. That spring still flows, Collins said bitterly. Drummond's cattle drink from it every day. Nothing illegal about it now. Ahanai leaned forward. Will you testify? In front of the land office? The whole town? Henderson nodded immediately. Collins hesitated. My boy's happy now, Collins said. We got work, got a life. This opens it all up again. It also gives you a chance to stop it happening to someone else, Nate said. Collins looked at him for a long moment, then at Anai. You Apache? Yes. My wife's Shoshone. Got treated about the same, like she wasn't quite a person worth protecting. He stood abruptly. I'll testify, but I want one thing in return. Name it, Nate said. When you win, not if, when, you file a complaint against Drummond with every office that'll listen. Territorial government, federal land office, railroad commission, all of it. You make noise until somebody with power pays attention. Deal. They shook hands. Collins's grip was iron despite the missing fingers. The door crashed open. Murphy stumbled in, hatless, shirt torn, blood running from his nose. He collapsed against the doorframe. They're coming, he gasped. Tonight. Drummond's men. Nate caught him before he fell. Ahanai grabbed a cloth, pressed it to Murphy's nose. His face was already swelling. Who did this? Nate demanded. Drummond's foreman. Caught me sending a telegram. Murphy's words came thick through the blood. They know about Henderson and Collins. Know they're here. How many men? Henderson asked, suddenly all business. 6, maybe 8. They're planning to make this place uninhabitable. Poison the well, burn the barn, scare you off before the hearing. Collins moved to the window, scanning the horizon. How much time? They were drinking, working up courage. Maybe 2 hours, maybe less. Father Mackey's face had gone pale. This is arson. Assault. We need the sheriff. Sheriff's in Drummond's pocket, Murphy said. Won't come. Even if he would, we're 30 miles from town. Nate looked around the cabin. 5 men, 1 woman, 2 rifles, and maybe 2 hours before violence arrived. The mathematics were not good. We leave, he said. Pack what we can, ride to town, file complaints with the territorial marshal. And by morning, your ranch is ashes, Henderson said. Your cattle scattered or dead, everything you fought for, gone. Better than getting killed defending it. Is it? Collins's voice was hard. Because I ran. Took my boy and left without a fight. Know what that taught him? That when powerful men come, you fold. That's not the lesson I want him to remember. Anai stood. Her hand rested on the knife at her belt. How defensible is this cabin? Ahanai, Nate started. How defensible? He looked at her, then at the others. Henderson had the eyes of a man who'd seen combat. Collins was already checking sightlines through the windows. Murphy held the bloody cloth to his face, but his jaw was set. Stone foundation, Nate said slowly. Thick walls. Will's 30 feet from the porch. Hard to poison without exposure. Barns separate. We lose that, we lose it. But the cabin can hold. Then we hold, H&I said. Father Mackey's hands shook. This is madness. Violence begets violence. So does surrender, Collins said. I'm staying. Me too, Henderson added. Murphy nodded, still pressing the cloth to his face. Nate looked at Mackey. The old priest's eyes were frightened but steady. I'll stay, Mackey said quietly. Not to fight, but to witness. Whatever happens here tonight, someone needs to testify truthfully about it. Nate felt the weight of it settle on him. This had moved beyond land and water. This was about whether they'd be allowed to exist, to resist, to matter. All right, he said. We prepare. They moved fast. Nate, Gee, and Collins barricaded windows. Henderson and Murphy hauled water buckets inside in case of fire. Ahanai sharpened knives and checked ammunition. Father Mackey sat at the table, writing. documenting names, dates, threats, creating a record. The sun dropped toward the horizon. The windmill's grinding seemed louder now, a countdown rhythm. Nate stood on the porch one last time before full dark. The ditch water still flowed, catching the dying light. The cattle grazed peacefully. The wooden gate with Anai's initials stood solid. 20 days until the hearing, but they had to survive tonight first. Behind him, Anai appeared. She stood close enough that their shoulders touched. Scared? She asked. Terrified. Good. Means you're sane. She paused. Thank you for not making me run. Thank you for teaching me how to stand. The first star appeared, the windmill ground, and in the distance the faint sound of hooves began. They came at full dark. 8 riders, torches in hand, stopping just beyond rifle range. The flames painted their face orange and demonic. Nate stood on the porch, Winchester loaded. Henderson and Collins flanked the windows inside. Murphy guarded the back door despite his injuries. Anai crouched near the well, knife and revolver ready. Father Mackey remained at the table, pen moving across paper, bearing witness. Brennan! The shout came from the lead rider. Not Drummond, he'd sent his foreman to do the dirty work. You've got one chance. Woman comes out, you sign the ranch over, everyone walks away. Go to hell, Nate called back. A torch arced through the air, landed short of the barn. The dry grass caught immediately. Another torch followed, this one reaching the barn's roof. Fire! Collins shouted. Henderson was already moving with a bucket. They'd known the barn was indefensible. The plan was to save the cabin. But watching the structure burn, watching 3 years of work turn to smoke, made Nate's finger tighten on the trigger. Don't shoot first, Henderson hissed. Let them commit. We need them guilty. The riders whooped as the barn blazed. They circled closer, emboldened. One dismounted, approaching the well. Anai stepped into view, revolver raised. That's far enough. The man stopped, surprised to see her armed. Easy now. Just want to help you make the right choice. Already made it. He lunged. Anai fired into the dirt at his feet. The crack echoed across the prairie. The man scrambled backward. The riders opened fire. Bullets punched through windows, splintered wood. Everyone dropped flat. Glass shattered. The smell of gunpowder mixed with burning hay. Nate returned fire, aiming high. Warning shots, making them think twice about rushing the cabin. How much ammunition? Henderson called. Enough, maybe. The shooting stopped. Hoofbeats receded. The riders regrouped at the edge of torchlight. They're planning something, Collins said. Murphy pointed. There. They're splitting up. 4 riders circled left, 4 right. Classic pincer movement. Catch them in crossfire. This is attempted murder, Father Mackey said, still writing. I'm documenting every shot. Won't matter if we're dead, Murphy muttered. The riders charged from both sides. Nate fired, levered, fired again. Henderson and Collins matched his rhythm. The noise was deafening in the confined space. One rider fell, horse shot, not man. The animal screamed and thrashed. The rider rolled clear, crawling toward darkness. But the others reached the cabin. Torches hit the roof. Flames spread fast across the dry shingles. We can't stay, Henderson said. Smoke filled the cabin. Mackey's papers scattered as burning debris fell. Anai dragged him toward the door. They stumbled outside, choking. The riders were waiting, then new sound. Different hooves, coming fast from the east. A dozen riders burst into the firelight. The leader wore a deputy's badge, but these weren't Drummond's men. Federal Marshal, the lead rider bellowed. Everyone down! The attacking riders scattered like quail. 3 escaped into darkness. 5 more were surrounded, thrown to the ground, disarmed. The marshal dismounted, a compact man with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He surveyed the burning barn, the bullet-pocked cabin, the wounded horse still screaming. Henderson put the horse down with a single shot. The sudden silence felt heavy. Who's Brennan? The marshal asked. Me? Nate stepped forward, still holding the Winchester. Lower that weapon, now. Nate complied. The marshal's men secured the captured riders. Zip-tied hands, rough handling. One had blood running from his scalp where he'd taken a graze. Marshal Theodore Grant, the man said. Got a telegram 2 days ago. Claims of systematic land fraud, intimidation, potential murder conspiracy, came to investigate. He gestured at the chaos. Looks like I arrived just in time. Who sent the telegram? Nate asked. A figure stepped from the shadows behind the marshal's men. Mrs. Chen, the laundry owner. Her face was grim in the firelight. I did, she said. After that town meeting, I wired every federal office I could think of. My husband's cousin warned us before he left, told us to document everything. We've been keeping records for 2 years. Henderson moved forward. Marshal, I'm Jacob Henderson. Lost my ranch to Drummond in '85. False survey, fraudulent foreclosure. I can testify. William Collins. Same story, '86. I'll testify. Marshal Grant pulled out a notebook. And the woman? Aithnai stepped into the light. Aithnai Whitehorse, widow of Corporal James Whitehorse, Apache scout. I have documentation of my legal status and my right to file for an allotment parcel. The marshal studied her, then Nate. This your partnership case? The one causing all the fuss? Yes, sir. Where's Drummond? These are his men. He sent them. Can you prove that? One of the captured riders, younger, terrified, spoke up. He'll kill us if we talk. He'll hang if you don't, Grant said. Attempted arson, assault with deadly weapons, conspiracy to commit murder. I count 6 federal charges before breakfast. Anyone who cooperates gets reduced sentencing. First one to talk gets the best deal. The young rider cracked immediately. Names poured out, dates, payments. Drummond's explicit orders to make the ranch uninhabitable, the promise of $50 each if they succeeded. Father Mackey handed Grant his documentation. I witnessed everything, every shot fired, every threat made. Grant read by torchlight, his expression darkening. When he finished, he looked at the captured men. You boys just helped me build a case against one of the territory's most prominent land agents. Congratulations on your new careers as federal witnesses. He turned to Nate. Your cabin's still standing, barn's gone, but that's wood. You rebuild. In the meantime, I'm placing this property under federal protection until the hearing. Anyone touches it, they answer to me. The hearing's in 15 days, Nate said. I'll be there. So will these gentlemen. Grant gestured to Henderson and Collins, along with written testimony from 6 other ranchers we've identified. Drummond's pattern is clear now. The barn collapsed with a groan and a shower of sparks. Flames reached toward the stars. But the cabin stood, the well was intact, and the ditch still flowed, water reflecting firelight. Aithnai moved to stand beside Nate. Her face was streaked with soot and sweat. Is it over? She asked quietly. Not yet, Nate said. But maybe we just survived the worst of it. Marshal Grant overheard. Don't count on that. Cornered animals bite hardest. Drummond's got 15 days to figure out how to wriggle free. He'll use every one of them. He was right, but for tonight, they'd held the line. And sometimes, that was enough. 15 days became 14, then 10, then 5. Drummond didn't run. He fortified. New lawyers appeared, expensive ones from Denver. They filed motions, challenges, procedural delays, claimed Marshal Grant had no jurisdiction, demanded the case be moved to territorial court, where Drummond had more influence. But Grant was relentless. Each motion was countered, each delay denied, the hearing date held firm. Nate and Aithnai used the time to rebuild. The barn went up faster with help. Mrs. Chen's husband brought lumber at cost. Henderson and Collins stayed on, working for meals, in the satisfaction of seeing Drummond squirm. Even Murphy helped when the bank wasn't watching, sneaking out after dark with nails and tools. The cabin's bullet holes became a kind of monument. They patched them but left the scars visible. Evidence. 3 days before the hearing, Aithnai filed her allotment claim. The Indian Affairs agent who reviewed her discharge papers was young, newly appointed, and blessedly honest. He approved her widow status on the spot. 160 acres, he said, marking the boundaries on a map. Adjoining the Brennan Ranch to the east. Water rights shared by mutual agreement. Sign here. Aithnai's hand shook as she wrote her name. Nate signed beside her as witness, their names together on an official document, legal, binding, real. That night, they sat on the rebuilt porch, watching stars. The new barn smelled of fresh-cut pine. The windmill turned smoothly, its gear finally fixed by Collins, who'd been a machinist before ranching. Feels different now, Aithnai said. Having paper that says I belong. You always belonged. Not according to law. Law said I was temporary, contingent, someone else's problem. She looked at her calloused hands. Now law says I'm a landowner, a person with rights. Strange how paper changes everything. Paper, and people willing to honor it. That's the part that scares me. Drummond's got paper too. Lawyers who know how to make wrong look right. Nate didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. The hearing convened at St. Xavier's Church, the only building large enough for the crowd. Every seat filled, people stood along the walls. The smell of sweat and nervous energy was thick. Marshal Grant presided from Father Mackey's desk, pushed to the front. 2 territorial judges flanked him, brought from Cheyenne specifically for this case. The room had the weight of official power. Drummond sat in front, surrounded by his lawyers. His suit was immaculate, his face calm, but his hands gripped the armrests too tight. Nate and Achnai sat across the aisle. Henderson, Collins, and 4 other former ranchers filled the row behind them. Each man had documents, each had a story. "We'll hear the boundary dispute first," Grant announced. "Mr. Drummond, present your survey." Drummond's lead lawyer stood, a silver-haired man named Carver who spoke like he was addressing a jury. He presented Patterson's measurements, maps showing the aquifer extending onto territorial land, affidavits from 3 witnesses claiming the boundary markers had always been positioned where Patterson placed them. "Professional survey work," Carver said smoothly. "Certified by the county, properly filed. This supersedes any," he gestured dismissively at Mackey's records, "unofficial church ledgers maintained by a priest with no surveying credentials." Father Mackey started to stand. Grant waved him down. "We'll hear the defense." Henderson stood. His voice was rough but steady. "In 1885, Drummond filed the exact same motion against my ranch. Said my boundary was wrong. His surveyor, same man Patterson, found in his favor. I lost 60 yards of prime grazing, couldn't make payments after that. Foreclosed 6 months later." "Similar pattern on my land," Collins added. "Spring that had been mine for 3 years suddenly became territorial property. Same surveyor, same outcome." One by one, the other ranchers testified. The pattern was undeniable. 6 ranches, 6 boundary disputes, 6 foreclosures, all surveyed by Patterson, all bought by Drummond. Grant leaned forward. "Mr. Patterson, you're present?" The thin surveyor stood in the back, looking like he wished he could disappear through the floorboards. "Under oath," Grant said. "Have you ever been paid to file false measurements?" The church was silent. Patterson's mouth opened and closed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "I'll remind you," Grant continued, "that lying to a federal marshal is a crime, and that you've already been identified by multiple witnesses as complicit in fraud." Patterson's shoulders sagged. "Yes." The church erupted. Grant's gavel cracked 3 times before order returned. "How many times?" Grant asked. 8, maybe 9. I didn't—" Patterson's voice broke. "He said it was just correcting old errors, that the original surveys were sloppy. I needed the money." Drummond shot to his feet. "He's lying. I never—" "Sit down," one of the judges said coldly. Carver tried to salvage it. "This testimony is unreliable. A man facing criminal charges will say anything. We have corroboration," Grant said. He gestured to Father Mackey. "The church records show the original boundary markers. We sent federal surveyors to verify them 3 days ago. The measurements match Father Mackey's records exactly, which means Mr. Patterson's surveys were consistently wrong by 50 to 70 yards, all in Mr. Drummond's favor." He let that sink in. "Furthermore, we have financial records showing payments from Mr. Drummond to Mr. Patterson totaling $3,000 over 2 years. For a county surveyor making $40 a month, that's quite a windfall." Drummond's lawyer shuffled papers frantically, finding nothing, drowning. The judges conferred quietly, then the senior one spoke. "The boundary claim is denied. The Brennan Ranch boundaries are established per the original 1879 survey. The aquifer is entirely on private property. No permits required." Nate felt Achnai's hand find his under the table. Her grip was iron. "Now," Grant said, "the matter of Mrs. Whitehorse's status." Achnai stood. Her discharge papers were spread before her. "I have documented proof of my husband's death. My allotment claim has been approved by the Indian Affairs Office. My land adjoins Mr. Brennan's ranch. We have filed a legal partnership for shared water resources." "Any objections?" the judge asked. Drummond's lawyer tried. "The partnership was filed after the initial complaint and approved before this hearing," the judge interrupted. "Legal partnerships don't require your permission, counselor. They require proper documentation, which has been provided." He looked at Achnai. "Your claim is recognized. Your partnership is valid." The church erupted again, this time in celebration. Grant gavelled for order. "Finally, criminal charges. Mr. Drummond, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, assault, and systematic fraud. Bail is set at $5,000. Drummond's face went white, then purple. "This is persecution. I have rights." "So did the 6 ranchers you destroyed," Grant said. "Marshal, take him." Two deputies moved forward. Drummond was cuffed, led out through a crowd that parted like he carried plague. His lawyers followed, already planning appeals. But Nate knew the truth. The fight was over. The pattern was exposed. Drummond might wriggle free of jail time, but his land empire was finished. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm. People crowded around, congratulating, asking questions. Mrs. Chen hugged Achnai fiercely. Henderson and Collins shook hands with everyone, grinning like fools. Father Mackey appeared beside Nate, eyes wet. Your wife would be proud. She'd say I was foolish for fighting. She'd be right, and still proud. Mackey squeezed his shoulder and moved on. Murphy approached hesitantly. His face was still bruised from the beating. Sarah wants you both to come to dinner, Sunday. We'll be there, Nate said. They rode home in the golden light of late afternoon. The ditch water flowed steady. The cattle grazed peacefully. The new barn stood solid and square. At the gate Achnai had carved, they both dismounted. Her initials were still there, weathered now but clear. Nate pulled his knife and added his own beside hers. NBAW. Partnership, he said. Partnership, she agreed. They stood together as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything amber and gold. The windmill turned smoothly, singing its repaired song. Water flowed through the carved gate, catching light. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, real rain coming. Not drought-breaking yet, but promise. Possibility, the war was over, the work remained, and that was exactly how it should be. Ending. Folks ask sometimes how it came to be. Apache woman and white rancher, names carved side by side on a gate that's weathered 20 winters now. Simple answer. Water runs where it's earned, not where it's owed. Long answer takes you back to a posting board, a man's shame, and the sound of a shovel scraping hope into dry ground. Takes you through fire and lawyers and men who thought law was a weapon instead of a foundation. Drummond never went to prison. His lawyers were too good for that. But the railroad dropped him, his backers scattered. Last anyone heard, he was selling insurance in Kansas City, still convinced he'd been wronged. Patterson lost his surveyor's license. Works as a clerk now, drinks too much, sometimes apologizes to strangers. The 6 ranchers never got their land back. But they got something else. Testimony that mattered. Proof that resistance works when enough people refuse to be silent. As for Nate and Achnai, they built something that lasted. 2 parcels joined by water and will. Their cattle bore calves. Their fences held. When drought came again, and it always does, they had the knowledge to survive it. Travelers still stop sometimes, seeing that carved gate with 2 sets of initials worn smooth by years and weather. They ask what it means. Means some folks say a woman can't live without a man's land claim. They're right, in 1887, anyway. Law said so. But what they miss is this: he couldn't live without her knowledge, her hands, her refusal to be invisible. So they built something neither could have built alone. And the water just kept running.